I never thought I'd find myself standing in front of this place. An old farmhouse standing alone on the edge of a forgotten dirt road swallowed by trees and silence. The kind of silence that presses into your ears and makes your own heartbeat feel loud, almost deafening. When I bought this house, I was chasing peace, a break from the chaos of the city. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I could breathe again. But this house has a story, and I could feel it the moment I stepped inside. The air was thick, dusty with years of neglect. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet like they resented my presence. Shadows clung to the corners like old regrets. I shrugged it off at first. It was just an old building after all. Places like this always have that musty smell, the creaks, the cold drafts slipping under doors. I started unpacking, telling myself it was going to be fine. Fresh start, new life. But that night, the first night, everything changed. I woke up to a faint sound, like footsteps, soft and slow on the creaking floor above me, but I was alone, no one else in the house. I listened, heart pounding, waiting for the sound to come again. It didn't. Maybe it was the old house settling. I tried to go back to sleep. The next morning I told myself it was nothing. But as days passed, the sounds grew louder. At first it was whispers, so faint I could barely catch the words. Just fragments, voices overlapping like a broken radio. Sometimes they sounded like arguing, sometimes like crying. One night I thought I heard a woman pleading, "Please, don't leave me here." I started to keep a notebook by my bed, writing down every sound, every word I thought I heard. The voices felt like echoes from the past, trapped inside these walls. But who were they? And why were they reaching out? I began exploring the house more carefully. The rooms were empty but heavy with a strange energy, as if the past wasn't ready to let go. In the attic I found old photographs, faded faces staring back at me. A family decades ago, their smiles frozen in time. But in one picture, the mother's eyes seemed hollow, like she was hiding a terrible secret. At night, the whispers turned into footsteps walking the hallways, pacing back and forth. I'd get up to check, but the house would be empty. The old grandfather clock in the hallway sometimes chimed at random hours, even though it hadn't worked in years. Once I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror, a shadow just behind me. But when I turned, no one was there. I thought maybe I was imagining things, losing my mind from loneliness. But the neighbors, when I asked about the house, they went quiet. One elderly man told me in a low voice, "That house, it's better left alone. There's things inside there that don't rest." Curiosity turned to unease. I felt like I was being watched. Not by a person, but by something older, something waiting. One night the voices grew desperate. I could hear the words clearly. "Help us. Please." It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a call for help. I started recording the sounds with my phone, hoping to capture proof. When I listened back, the recordings were distorted, overlapping layers of voices speaking different things at once. I tried to make sense of them, piecing together phrases like betrayed, lost, and forgotten. The house was alive with memories, trapped moments of pain repeating endlessly. I didn't know what I was getting into, but the house had made its presence known, and now I was part of its story. The next days were a blur. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow felt like a thread pulling me deeper. I barely slept. I questioned my own sanity. The old walls seemed to breathe with secrets, secrets that didn't want to stay buried. The echoes weren't just sounds. They were warnings, memories, and perhaps something more. And I was running out of time to understand what they wanted before I became just another echo lost inside this empty house. I kept telling myself I could handle this. that it was just my mind playing tricks. But the house had a way of breaking down every layer of my certainty. Days passed, and the echoes became harder to ignore. They weren't just sounds anymore. They felt like voices trapped in the very walls, desperate to be heard. I started hearing them during the day, faint but clear, like a whisper just behind my ear. Sometimes I caught bits of conversations. A mother scolding a child, a man's angry shout, a woman's desperate sobbing. I spent hours searching for anything I could find about the house's past. The old records at the town library told a story much darker than the cheerful photos I had found in the attic. Several families had lived here over the last century, but every one of them had left abruptly. Some even vanished without a trace. There was a pattern of tragedy, accidents, disappearances, sudden deaths. The locals called it cursed, but no one wanted to talk about it openly. One afternoon, as I sifted through a box of old papers I'd found hidden beneath the floorboards in the living room, I uncovered a faded journal. The handwriting was delicate, and the ink had almost faded completely. It belonged to the house's first owner, a woman named Eleanor, who had lived here over 100 years ago. Reading her words felt like stepping back in time. She wrote about the joy of building a home, but also about a growing darkness she felt creeping into the walls. Whispers that no one else could hear, shadows moving just out of sight. Her entries became more frantic as she described nights filled with voices, footsteps, and a cold presence that wouldn't leave her alone. On the last page, she wrote simply, "I fear this house will be my grave." I felt a chill run down my spine. Was Eleanor one of the echoes? Was her fear still trapped here, reaching out to me across time? That night, I tried to keep my mind busy, forcing myself to ignore the noises. But when the clock struck midnight, the house came alive. It started with the whispering. Soft voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand but somehow knew was full of pain and anger. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, waiting for them to stop. They didn't. Instead, I heard a faint knocking, soft but insistent, as if someone was begging to be let in. I stood frozen, heart racing. I wanted to call out, to ask what they wanted, but no words came. The knocking stopped. Silence followed, heavy, suffocating silence. Then, as if waking from a nightmare, I heard the faintest sobbing from the corner of the room. I turned slowly, and for a split second I saw a figure. A woman, pale and translucent, her eyes filled with sorrow. I blinked and she was gone. From that night on, I couldn't ignore the house's presence. It wasn't just echoes anymore, it was something alive, waiting, watching. I started talking to the voices, asking them questions. At first I got no response, but slowly words began to form in the silence. Names, places, warnings. Find the truth. Remember what was lost. Don't let us fade. The house was pleading with me, and I realized I was no longer just an occupant. I was a participant in something much larger, much darker. One afternoon, a neighbor, an old man with eyes like storm clouds, stopped by uninvited. He looked me up and down, then said in a gravelly voice, "You don't belong here. None of us do. This place takes what it wants." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night I found new voices. Children laughing softly in the hallway, footsteps running upstairs, doors opening and closing on their own. I followed the sounds, drawn deeper into the house's secrets. In the basement I found another journal. This one belonged to a young boy named Thomas, who had lived here decades after Eleanor. His writing was filled with fear and confusion. He described the shadows that whispered his name, the feeling of being watched, and the cold hands that touched him when no one was around. His last entry chilled me to my core. They say if you listen long enough, the house will show you the way out. But what if it's leading you deeper in? I realized then that the house wasn't just haunted, it was a trap. But I couldn't leave. I was drawn in, tangled in its web. Every night the voices grew louder, more urgent. They repeated their stories, their pain, their anger. I was beginning to understand fragments, betrayals, lost children, broken promises. And with every passing day I felt myself slipping, the lines between past and present blurring. I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on to who I was before the echoes swallowed me whole. I never thought a house could feel so alive, so hungry. But this one was different. It wasn't just haunted, it was waiting. And it wanted me to see what had happened here, to understand why the echoes were trapped and why I might be next. After days of restless nights and chasing shadows, I realized I couldn't run from the past anymore. I had to face it. So I started piecing everything together, bit by bit, like assembling a broken puzzle. The journals, the photographs, the whispers, they were clues left behind by those who came before me, the ones who had vanished or died here. I began to feel the weight of their pain pressing against my skin, suffocating me with every breath I took inside these walls. One morning I found a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards in the master bedroom. Inside was a small wooden box locked tight. I forced it open with a screwdriver and found a collection of letters. Yellowed, fragile, and stained with age. They were written by Eleanor's husband James to a woman named Clara. The words were heavy with guilt and secrecy. James wrote about a love affair, a betrayal that tore his family apart. He begged Clara to keep quiet, warning that if the truth came out, it would destroy everything. But his tone darkened as he hinted at something worse, a terrible mistake that couldn't be undone. I sat there trembling, the letters burning my hands. Could this be the root of the house's curse? A broken family destroyed by lies and betrayal? That night the voices changed. No longer whispers or cries, but angry, sharp accusations echoing through the halls. Liar, traitor, blood on your hands. The house wasn't just haunted by memories, it was alive with rage. I tried to block it out, but the echoes followed me everywhere. Even outside the house, I felt their eyes on me, judging me. I started seeing fleeting shadows at the edge of my vision, figures watching silently from the trees, vanishing when I looked directly. I questioned my own sanity. Was I being driven mad by isolation? Or was the house truly reaching out, desperate to be heard? One night, as the moon hung low and heavy, I awoke to a cold breeze brushing my face. The whispers had turned to cries. I followed them down the hallway, heart pounding in my chest. At the end of the corridor in the parlor, I saw her again, the pale woman from before. She stood by the fireplace, tears streaming down her translucent face. "Help us," she whispered, voice cracking. "Find the truth," she begged, reaching out a trembling hand. I stepped closer and the room grew colder, shadows swirling like smoke around us. The walls seemed to breathe, alive with trapped souls. I realized then that these echoes weren't just ghosts. They were prisoners caught in a loop of pain and betrayal, unable to move on until the truth was uncovered. Determined, I dived deeper into the house's past, scouring every nook and cranny. I found hidden letters, diaries, and newspaper clippings that pieced together a story darker than I could have imagined. Eleanor had discovered James' affair and confronted him. In a rage, James had tried to silence her. The confrontation ended in tragedy. Eleanor died that night, but the truth was buried, locked away like the secrets in this house. The spirits of Eleanor, Clara, and the others were trapped here, reliving their final moments over and over, unable to rest until justice was done. But revealing the truth wasn't simple. The house fought me every step of the way. Doors slammed shut, Shadows lunged from the darkness, and I felt hands brush against me in the empty rooms. One night, while reading Eleanor's final diary entry, I heard a whisper behind me. "You're next." I froze, heart pounding. The house was warning me. Was I becoming part of its story? Was I destined to be another echo trapped forever? Fear twisted in my gut, but I pushed forward. I contacted a local historian who confirmed the house's dark past, and together we uncovered a hidden cellar beneath the kitchen. Inside, we found evidence of the final confrontation: a blood-stained letter, a broken locket, and a faded portrait of Eleanor and James, frozen in a moment of despair. As we pieced together the last fragments, the house grew restless. The shadows lengthened, the whispers turned to screams, and I felt the walls closing in. In a desperate moment, I shouted into the darkness, promising to free them, to tell their story, and to bring peace. The house fell silent. For a moment, I thought it was over, but as I looked into the mirror, I caught a glimpse of movement behind me. An echo still waiting, still trapped. The past wasn't done with me yet. The silence that followed my promise was the kind that seeps into your bones, heavy, unnatural. I thought I might finally have a moment of peace, but the house wasn't done yet. It never would be. From that night on, everything changed. The whispers weren't just voices anymore. They became warnings, cold, sharp, and urgent. They clawed at my mind, tearing away the thin veil of reality I was clinging to. I started losing time. Minutes, or was it hours, slipped away like water through my fingers. I'd find myself standing in rooms I didn't remember entering, or awake in the middle of the night with no memory of how I got there. One night, the house showed me something different. In the darkness of my bedroom, a mirror fogged over, and through the mist I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. Her eyes, haunted and hollow, stared back at me. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "Find me." I blinked, and the mirror cleared, revealing only my own terrified face. It was Eleanor. That night, the boundary between the present and the past shattered. I found myself slipping into her memories, trapped in moments of fear and desperation. I saw James' betrayal, Eleanor's anguish, the final argument that ended in tragedy. I could feel her pain, her loneliness, and her fury burning inside me. But the house wasn't just a prison, it was a cage, and Eleanor's spirit was fighting to escape. I woke gasping, drenched in cold sweat, the echo of her screams still ringing in my ears. The house was trying to show me the truth, but it was also warning me, if I got too close, I could be trapped too. Days later, the neighbors started acting strange. They avoided my eyes, whispered behind closed doors. The old man who warned me disappeared without a trace. I realized the house's darkness was spreading, poisoning everything around it. One evening, as I walked home, I noticed the trees near the house seemed to bend away, as if repelled by an unseen force. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that twisted into monstrous shapes. Inside, the house was alive with movement. Doors slammed, glass shattered, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the basement. I knew I had to face whatever was down there. Armed with only a flashlight and the journals, I descended into the darkness. The air was thick and suffocating. I could hear faint whispers circling me, growing louder, more desperate. In the far corner, I found a trapdoor sealed tight. With trembling hands, I pried it open. Below was a hidden room, a shrine to pain and regret. Photographs, letters, and broken objects littered the floor, surrounded by candles long burned out. In the center stood a mirror, cracked and stained. As I approached, the surface shimmered and a figure appeared. Eleanor, trapped between worlds, her face twisted with sorrow. She reached out, begging for release. I reached back. Suddenly the house convulsed, walls shaking, the floor trembling beneath my feet. The echoes surged forward, their voices rising in a deafening roar. I realized then that freeing Eleanor meant freeing them all. But it would come at a cost. I made a choice. To break the curse, I had to take Eleanor's place, to become the next echo, the next prisoner of the house. The mirror pulled me in, cold and unforgiving. I struggled, fighting the darkness that tried to consume me. And then silence. I opened my eyes to find myself staring out from the other side of the glass. The house was still, the echoes quiet. Outside, I heard footsteps approaching. The door creaked open. A new family entered, unaware of the horror waiting for them, and I was trapped. A reflection, a whisper, an echo in an empty house.